Sporting Kansas City have floated between shambolic and more recently mediocre this season. So why have they been so bad? What's been causing their recent upturn, and can it continue? Let's start with how they play. Peter Vermes has been at SKC for over a decade, and he likes this very basic possession 4-3-3 that pretty much everyone knows from youth, high school, soccer. This is what everyone knows, right? You have the anchor, the pivot player who receives possession, simple, nice passes, wins the ball in the midfield. You have fullbacks that ideally are bombing forward and overlapping and then getting back on defense. You have the midfield, which will change. One will go forward, one will stay back. Both will go forward to make this front five, or when the fullbacks go forward, they'll sort of come in and support. It's fairly basic stuff, and there's nothing special about it. It's very easy to understand, and when it works, it works. When you have the right players, there's really nothing wrong with it, and that is the first problem that SKC has been having. Now, in my opinion, this is SKC's best lineup from what I've seen in this season, and they've never all been fit together. Even if you disagree with me on a few of the picks, very likely that they really haven't been all fit together. And even if you disagree with me on the picks again, players like Tommy and Radoja haven't really played a whole lot together, and when they have, they've been good. And Tommy specifically has been really great this season, putting up great attacking numbers, and that's where Radoja comes in, as he makes those simple passes, makes the defensive side of the game, keeps possession, and him supporting allows Tommy to get forward, and Tommy is a great link between that midfield and the attack. And when he doesn't have that support, SKC look flat. They don't have the same depth, and it just doesn't really work for them. Even when you have all these players together, they've still been coming back from injuries. They haven't been at their best, they haven't been fully fit. And when you don't have a team that's fully fit, obviously they're not going to perform to their highest capability. Even in the 4-1 win over Portland, you had 3 players coming back from injury that were questionable or out the week before. But injuries don't excuse everything, and SKC's poor play has been kind of about mentality. You have professional soccer players can't make 5-yard passes, making stupid fouls, stupid red cards. They had 3 red cards by the time they scored 3 goals, which is absolutely absurd. That just doesn't happen unless there's something wrong with the mentality. And we saw this situation so many times in SKC's games, where they might have been playing okay forward, and then they lose the ball, nobody tracks back, and you have a 5v2 on the center backs. And this is a situation in where a player would get in and the center back would have to foul them because there's no other option, and that's how they get the second yellows or the straight red cards. And that's the kind of thing that has been happening. The wingers, fullbacks just jogging back. Or on the other hand, when you have these fullbacks on the ball, they're not getting forward because they assume that they're just going to lose the ball. And when that happens, you don't get enough numbers in attack, and then you're outnumbered in attack and you end up losing it, and it's just a vicious cycle of things being confirmed. They don't push up, so they don't create an attack, so they lose the ball, so they think, oh, we have to stay back. And so they stay back and they don't go forward, and then they can't generate any attack. And then whenever they do go forward, they're not all getting back. And I'm saying a lot right now, but basically all it means is they weren't really trying that hard. Now, in a video I watched recently on a channel called It's Called Soccer, it's a great channel, they were arguing that one of the reasons for SKC's poor form is their lack of changing tactics. And they cited Klopp and Pep as examples of managers who have evolved their tactics over time. And that's true, but they are in different leagues, more mature leagues that have been around a long time, that have seen a lot of tactical evolution. Whereas in the MLS right now, Not that there's no tactics, but it's mostly focused on directness, on physicality, on working harder. And there's generally, I say generally, less focus on tactics, in the sense that you don't have teams that are focusing so specifically on the other team's tactics. Whereas in the Premier League, you have Liverpool, where everyone has figured out that Trent Alexander-Arnold will push up for Liverpool, and they look to get into space in behind, and that's just a known quantity. That's just a known thing that's happening, and that's when Klopp will evolve, and that's when he switches to the back three with the box midfield with Trent Alexander-Arnold at the base with Fabinho. That's a tactical evolution. Now, that's not something I've seen with SKC. In their games, I haven't seen a clear break in their tactics that's been exploited. As I said, it's mostly been players not tracking back, and that's not a system thing, that's a they're not tracking back thing. And the one place it has been exploited is against St. Louis, when they were pressing out really high. This is sort of what it looked like against St. Louis. You had Radoja on the ball, who really wasn't getting support from the midfield, and you can look at this and say, okay, it's a tactic problem, but this tactic works against pressing when you do it correctly. And that's why I don't think it's a problem, because what happened in the second half when Tommy came in is he shifted back, and now they had a 3 versus 2 in this midfield, and it looked a lot better. And that second half is when SKC ramped up their expected goals by a lot. And if they had played that way the entire game, it would have looked completely different. And when you're playing this possession system, it's good against a press when you can play out of it, when you have the right players, and when they have their full starting 11 firing, they have the right players. Now we're going to talk about the last problem with SKC, which is Peter Vermes and his team building. Now, you can have a lot of injuries and you can blame it on that, but the injuries wouldn't be a problem if you had players that were ready to come in and replace the starting 11. And that's where he's dropped the ball, especially in the context of how he runs the team, a team that he's been at for years and has had adequate time to plan. Not to mention that he's in charge of scouting, the sporting director, and he runs the academies. He's in charge of all these things. So he should be able to, from the youth system, be coaching his system in the youth teams to mold these players that will be ready to come in when the time comes, when they're needed. And they sort of had that a little bit with Davis, but he wasn't even playing at the start of the season. They only realized or even thought to bring him in after players had started returning from injury. So it has been a boost to them, but maybe should have come earlier. And I know he's a right back who was a center mid. Where have I seen that before? But that's not the point. The point is that with planning, Radoja should not be the only anchor in this team. Whether someone should have been brought in beforehand from the transfer market, or someone should have been being developed as an anchor these past however many years that Vermes has been running the academy. There should be replacements, there should be a plan. That's the advantage that you're supposed to get from having a coach that's involved in everything and is stable. Just look at Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson. He was deeply involved in all the academies, and the team building was perfect. He had the right number of experience with youth players and players in their prime, and he's able to plan that well because he's in control of everything. So Peter Vermes needs to be doing a better job of that. So poor team building has been exposed through injuries and bad mentality. That mentality has been improved with players returning, but they're still not fully fit. They could still get injured again. If they keep the same 11, sure, SKC is going to be pushing better, but there are clear warning signs from the start of the season that they need to change their approach, not on the field, but off it, in terms of getting the right players in, making sure they have backups, and just rounding out the squad, which should have been done already. It should have been planned. It hasn't. So he needs to start doing that now. Otherwise, these players get injured again, they're right back to where they started.